I watched my sister Emma walk across the stage at Paris Fashion Week, my braid, my signature braid, cascading down her back like a river of spun gold, and I knew exactly how this story would end because I'd already lived it once before. The cameras flashed, the crowd roared, and I sat in the audience with my newly shorn head, feeling lighter than I had in 2 lifetimes. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I died the first time. It was my 23rd birthday when the anaphylactic shock hit. We were at Le Bernardin, my favorite restaurant, or so I thought. It was my choice. Emma had suggested it with that sweet smile of hers, the one that had fooled me for over 2 decades. I'd been so excited. For once, my family was celebrating me. Not Emma's latest modeling contract, not her magazine cover, not her engagement to the son of a French luxury goods empire. Me. I remember the sensation of my throat closing, the panic, the way Emma's face had transformed from concern to something else, something cold and calculating in the split second before I lost consciousness. I remember my mother's voice, distant and tinny, saying, "Are you sure we should call an ambulance? The press might—" And then nothing. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, age 14, staring at the ceiling I'd stared at 1,000 times before. My hair, my beautiful waist-length hair that I'd spent 9 years growing, was intact. And I knew everything that was about to happen. The knowledge hit me like a freight train. Every betrayal, every stolen opportunity, every time my family had chosen Emma over me, sacrificed me for her, used me as a stepping stone for her success. I knew it all, and this time I was going to rewrite the ending. Let me paint you a picture of my family, the Beaumonts. On paper, we were perfect. My father, Richard Beaumont, ran a successful PR firm in Manhattan. My mother, Catherine, was a former model who'd transitioned into being a momager for Emma. And then there was Emma, beautiful, charismatic Emma, 18 months younger than me and 1,000 times more favored. And me? I was Lily, the older sister, the disappointment. It hadn't always been that way. When we were very young, before Emma's beauty became apparent, I was loved. I have vague memories of my mother braiding my hair with gentle hands, of my father swinging me around in the backyard. But somewhere around age 7, something shifted. Emma started getting approached by children's modeling scouts. Suddenly, every family conversation revolved around Emma's headshots, Emma's auditions, Emma's callbacks. I became invisible. Except when I was useful. And I was useful in one particular way. My hair. I'd inherited my grandmother's hair, thick, golden blonde, with a natural wave that caught light like honey. It was the kind of hair that made strangers stop and stare. My mother used to braid it for me every morning in an intricate pattern she'd learned from her own mother, a Dutch braid that started at the crown and wove in smaller braids along the way, creating an effect like a river of gold with tributaries flowing into it. It became my signature. Lily with the braid, people called me. It was the only thing that made me special. When Emma was 13 and I was 14, right where I was now, in this second life, she decided she wanted hair like mine. She'd been a model for 6 years by then, and her straight, fine brown hair was considered too ordinary by her agency. They wanted her to have something distinctive. So my mother stopped braiding my hair, just like that. No explanation, no apology. She simply transferred all that attention, all that time, all that skill to Emma. Every morning, I'd hear them in Emma's room, my mother's soft voice teaching her the pattern our grandmother had taught us, the pattern that was supposed to be ours, mine and my mother's. But Emma's hair wouldn't grow. It was too thin, too damaged from years of heat styling and bleaching for photo shoots. So they made me grow mine longer, much longer. And once a month, Emma would get extensions made from hair that matched mine exactly, hair that my mother bought from specialty suppliers, chosen to blend seamlessly with my natural color. Emma would wear my braid. She'd get the compliments, the modeling contracts, the opportunities. And I'd be there in the background, my own hair braided identically, looking like her shadow, her backup, her donor. "You're helping your sister," my mother would say whenever I protested. "Family supports family. Don't be selfish, Lily." So I stopped protesting. I grew my hair longer. I let them turn me into a mirror for Emma to gaze into, a template for her to copy. And I told myself it was fine, that this was what love looked like. In my first life, I'd kept my hair until I was 23. I'd worn that braid like a chain around my neck, binding me to a family that saw me as a resource, not a person. I'd let them take and take and take. Until that final dinner when Emma's shellfish allergy, the allergy she'd told her fiancé I'd developed so she could order my favorite dish and watch me die, had killed me. Not this time. This time, I woke up at 14 with 9 years of memories that hadn't happened yet. I knew that in 3 weeks, Emma would book the campaign that would launch her career, a teen fashion spread in Vogue. I knew that the photographer would fall in love with her braid, my braid, and that it would become her trademark. I knew that for the next 9 years, I would fade further and further into the background while Emma shone brighter, wearing my identity like a costume. I knew that when I was 17, I'd get into Columbia on a full scholarship for creative writing, and my parents would make me defer so I could travel with Emma to Milan Fashion Week as her assistant. I knew I'd eventually go to Columbia, but by then I'd be so ground down, so depleted that I'd sleepwalk through my degree. I knew that at 21, I'd meet Marcus Chen, a brilliant architect, and we'd fall in love. And I knew that Emma would seduce him away from me at my own graduation party just because she could, just to prove she could take anything that was mine. I knew that at 22, I'd write a novel, a beautiful, heartbreaking novel about sisters and betrayal. And I knew that Emma would steal the manuscript from my laptop and give it to her fiancé, Henri Rousseau, whose mother owned one of the largest publishing houses in France. Emma would publish it under her own name, claiming she'd been writing it in secret for years. And I knew that at 23, Emma would poison me at my birthday dinner, making it look like an accidental allergy exposure because I'd finally threatened to go public about the plagiarism. Because I'd finally found my spine, and she couldn't risk me speaking up. I knew all of it, and I was going to change everything. The first thing I did was cut my hair, not all of it, not yet, but I cut it to shoulder length, blunt and practical. My mother nearly had a stroke. "Lily, what have you done?" She stood in the doorway of the bathroom, face pale, hands shaking. "Your hair! Your beautiful hair!" "It's my hair," I said calmly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "I can cut it if I want." "But Emma's shoot! The photographer wanted you both to have matching braids. You've ruined everything." And there it was. Not "you look nice" or "it's your choice." Just Emma. Always Emma. "Then Emma can get extensions," I said. "I'm done." My mother's face transformed from shock to cold fury. "You selfish little girl, do you have any idea what you've just cost your sister? This could have been her big break." "Then let her earn her own big break," I said, "with her own hair, her own identity, her own anything." My mother didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, but I'd seen the future. I knew that in 3 weeks, Emma would still book that Vogue shoot. The photographer would be enchanted by her face, her presence, her natural charisma. She didn't need my hair to succeed. She never had. The braid had just been a shortcut, a way to claim something distinctive without earning it. Emma, of course, was furious. She screamed at me for an hour, accusing me of sabotaging her career out of jealousy. My father, as always, stayed silent, buried in his phone, unwilling to get involved in girl drama. But I held firm. And something strange happened. I felt powerful. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself over Emma. I'd drawn a boundary, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had just begun. With my shorter hair and newfound freedom, I threw myself into writing. I'd been a decent writer in my first life, but I'd always held back, afraid to be too good, too visible, too much. Afraid to outshine Emma. Not anymore. I started with short stories, submitting them to every literary magazine and contest I could find. I wrote in the early mornings before school and late into the night after everyone else had gone to bed. I wrote with the fury of someone who had 9 years of silence to make up for, 9 years of stolen words and suppressed identity. And people noticed. My first story was published in a small literary journal when I was 15. My second won a national competition for young writers. By 16, I had an agent. A sharp, brilliant woman named Sarah Chen who saw my potential and nurtured it fiercely. Sarah became the mentor I'd never had. She believed in my voice, my vision, my talent. She pushed me to dig deeper, to take risks, to stop playing small. Under her guidance, I started working on a different novel than the one I'd written in my first life. This one was sharper, angrier, truer. This one was about a girl who refused to disappear. Meanwhile, Emma's career was flourishing. She'd booked the Vogue shoot, and it had launched her into the stratosphere. She was everywhere: billboards, magazines, runway shows. She'd gotten expensive extensions that mimicked my old braid, and it had become her signature look. The press called her the girl with the golden braid. It should have bothered me. In my first life, it would have destroyed me. But this time, I knew the truth. She was wearing a costume. I was building something real. My mother, of course, couldn't understand. "Why do you insist on wasting your time with this writing hobby?" she'd ask, her voice dripping with disdain. "You could be helping Emma. You could be making real money as her assistant. But instead, you're scribbling in notebooks like some tortured artist." "It's not a hobby," I'd reply calmly. It's my career." She'd laugh, actually laugh. "Lily, darling, be realistic. How many people actually make it as writers? You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Emma is the talented one. You should focus on supporting her." I'd smile and return to my laptop. Because I knew something my mother didn't. In 7 years, I'd be a best-selling author, and Emma would be exposed as a fraud. But I had to be patient. I had to build my foundation carefully. At 17, I got into Columbia again, just as I had in my first life. This time, when my parents asked me to defer so I could help Emma with Milan Fashion Week, I said no. The explosion was spectacular. "You ungrateful brat!" my mother screamed. "After everything we've done for you, fed you, clothed you, given you a home, and you can't do this one thing for your sister?" "I've done 1,000 things for Emma," I said quietly. "I grew my hair for her. I braided it like hers. I faded into the background so she could shine. I'm not doing it anymore." "If you go to Columbia, don't expect us to pay for anything," my father said, speaking up for the first time. "You're on your own." "Fine," I said. "I have a full scholarship anyway." "And don't expect to come home for holidays," my mother added. "If you're choosing yourself over family, then you're not part of this family." It hurt. God, it hurt. But I'd died once already. I knew what real pain felt like. This was just the death of an illusion. The illusion that my family had ever truly loved me. So I went to Columbia. I moved into a tiny dorm room and threw myself into my studies and my writing. I was lonely sometimes, especially during Thanksgiving and Christmas when my roommates went home and I stayed in the empty building. But I was free, and freedom, I was learning, was worth any price. Sarah continued to guide me. My novel was taking shape, and she was shopping it to publishers. We had interest from several houses, but Sarah was holding out for the right deal, the right editor, the right publisher, the right launch strategy. "You're going to be huge, Lily," she'd tell me. "But we have to be smart about it. We get one debut. We have to make it count." During my sophomore year, I met Marcus Chen again. Or rather, I met him for the first time in this timeline, though I remembered everything about our relationship from my previous life. He was in the architecture program, brilliant and kind and funny. We met at a coffee shop near campus, both reaching for the last blueberry muffin. He'd smiled and said, "You take it. I've had enough sugar today." I'd laughed and said, "Let's split it." We'd ended up talking for 3 hours. In my first life, I'd fallen for him instantly and completely. I'd loved him with a desperate intensity born of years of being unloved by my family. And when Emma had taken him from me, it had shattered me. This time, I was careful. I liked Marcus. How could I not? He was wonderful, but I kept my heart guarded. I didn't tell him about Emma, about my family, about the poison that lived in my past and future. I just enjoyed his company, our conversations, our gentle friendship that slowly deepened into something more. We started dating in the spring of sophomore year. It was sweet and easy and uncomplicated. Marcus didn't care that I came from money or that my sister was a famous model. He loved me for my words, my thoughts, my dreams. He read everything I wrote and gave thoughtful feedback. He believed in me. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that Emma would try to take him from me again. So I made a plan. Junior year, my novel sold. Not just sold, it sparked a bidding war between 5 major publishers. Sarah negotiated a 7-figure deal with a major house with a significant marketing budget and a planned lead title launch. The book was called The Golden Thread, and it was about a girl whose family literally steals her identity thread by thread, weaving it into a tapestry that celebrates her sister instead. It was a fantasy novel, magical and strange, but anyone who knew my story would recognize the truth beneath the metaphor. The publication date was set for the fall of my senior year. Sarah was positioning me as the next big voice in literary fiction. Book bloggers and industry insiders were already buzzing. I was going to be huge. I didn't tell my family. I'd learned in my first life that sharing my victories with them was like feeding candy to sharks. It only made them hungrier to take more. So I kept my success secret, a golden apple I could reveal when the timing was right. Meanwhile, Emma's star continued to rise. She'd been on the cover of Vogue 3 times. She'd walked for Chanel, Dior, Valentino. She'd become engaged to Henri Rousseau, the heir to the Rousseau publishing and luxury goods empire. Their engagement was announced in Women's Wear Daily and celebrated across the fashion world. Henri was exactly as I remembered him, handsome, charming, and utterly devoted to Emma. In my first life, I'd met him at Emma's engagement party and felt nothing but happiness for my sister. I hadn't known then that he'd be complicit in stealing my novel, that he'd help Emma pass off my words as her own. This time, I watched him with clear eyes. And I planned. Because here's what I knew. Emma was going to try to steal my work again. It was in her nature. She'd spent her whole life taking what was mine. My hair, my identity, my boyfriend, my words. She couldn't help herself. And this time, I was going to let her do it. I was going to let her steal everything. And then I was going to destroy her. The trap was set in the spring of my senior year, 3 months before my book was set to publish. I came home for Easter, my first visit since I'd left for Columbia. My mother had called, her voice stiff and formal, extending a grudging invitation. Emma's engagement party is that weekend. Henri's family will be there. It would look strange if you weren't. So I came. And I brought Marcus. The moment we walked into my childhood home, I could feel the shift in energy. My mother's eyes swept over Marcus, assessing his value. My father barely looked up from his phone. And Emma's eyes locked onto Marcus like a hawk spotting prey. I'd prepared him, of course. Not for everything. I couldn't tell him about my rebirth, about my foreknowledge. But I'd told him enough. That my family was toxic. That my sister had a history of taking things that were mine. That this weekend would be difficult and I needed him to trust me. Marcus, bless him, had listened seriously and promised to stick by me no matter what. The engagement party was held at a boutique hotel in Manhattan, a glittering affair with hundreds of guests from the fashion and publishing worlds. Emma wore a custom Valentino gown and her signature braid, my braid, enhanced with tens of thousands of dollars worth of extensions. I wore a simple black dress and my short, practical bob. I'd been growing my hair out slowly over the past 3 years, but it was still only to my shoulders. Next to Emma, I looked plain. Ordinary, forgettable, exactly as I'd planned. Henri was charming and attentive to Emma, as expected, but I watched him carefully, saw the way his eyes occasionally drifted to other women, the way he drank just a little too much, the way he laughed too loudly at his own jokes. He was a man who loved the idea of being in love, who loved the prestige of being engaged to a famous model, but who didn't actually know Emma at all. And Emma watched Marcus. I saw it happen in real time. She'd glide by our table and smile at him. She'd touch his arm when she asked him questions about his work. She'd laugh at his jokes with that tinkling, practiced laugh that she used in interviews. Marcus, to his credit, was polite but distant. He kept his hand on mine, his attention focused on me, but I could see Emma's interest sharpening. This wasn't just casual flirtation. This was predatory. She wanted him, not because she loved him or even liked him, but because he was mine. The next day, Easter Sunday, we all had brunch at my parents' house. Afterward, I made a show of being exhausted and suggested Marcus and I go for a walk to get some air. We left together, but I told him I'd forgotten my phone and needed to run back inside. I left him alone in the garden. I watched from the upstairs window as Emma appeared 5 minutes later, as I'd known she would. I watched her approach Marcus, her movements calculated and graceful. I watched her flirt, saw her touch his arm, his shoulder, lean in close. And I watched Marcus step back, politely but firmly, and shake his head. He pointed toward the house, toward me. And then he walked away, leaving Emma standing alone in the garden, her face twisted with frustration. Phase 1 complete. I'd shown Emma something she couldn't have. Now I needed to show her something she could steal. That evening, before Marcus and I left to drive back to campus, I made sure to leave my laptop accidentally on the desk in my childhood bedroom, the laptop with my nearly complete manuscript on it, the manuscript that wouldn't be published for another 3 months, that no one outside my publisher and agent had read yet. The manuscript that I'd modified specifically for this purpose. See, the book that was set to publish, The Golden Thread, was finished. It was edited, formatted, sent to the printer. It was done. But the book on my laptop was different. It had the same title, the same basic premise, but the execution was cruder, the writing less polished, the ending less satisfying. It was the first draft I'd written 2 years ago, before my editor had helped me shape it into something brilliant. It was good enough to impress someone who didn't understand the craft of writing. Good enough to seem valuable, worth stealing. But it was different enough that when the theft was exposed, there would be no question about who had written what. I left it there, password protected but not secured, because I knew Emma had been stealing my passwords since we were kids. She'd watched me type them 1,000 times, had seen my patterns. She'd be able to get in, and she did. I knew she did because 2 weeks later, Sarah called me, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Lily," she said, "I just got a very interesting email from Henri Rousseau's mother. She's the head of Rousseau Publishing." "I know," I said calmly. "She says that Emma has submitted a manuscript to them, a fantasy novel about sisters and identity theft, called The Golden Thread." I closed my eyes, right on schedule. "That's my book, Sarah." "I know it's your book, Lily. I sold your book 8 months ago. It's coming out in 3 months. What the hell is going on?" "Emma stole the early draft from my laptop when I was home for Easter." I knew she would. There was a long silence. Then, "You knew she would steal your manuscript and you let it happen?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because last time she got away with it." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Last time?" I caught myself. "I mean, I've watched her steal from me my whole life, Sarah. My hair, my identity, my accomplishments. I wanted to catch her in the act this time. I wanted proof." Another silence. Then Sarah laughed, a sharp, fierce sound. "You brilliant, devious girl. You set a trap." "Yes." "And now they're about to publish a stolen manuscript that's inferior to the version we're publishing." "Yes." "Lily, this could get messy. Are you sure you want to do this? We could just send a cease and desist, make them drop it quietly." "No," I said firmly. "I want everyone to know what she did. I want her exposed." "All right," Sarah said slowly. "Then let's play this strategically. Don't reach out to them yet. Let them move forward with it. The further they get in the publication process, the more expensive and embarrassing it'll be when the truth comes out. How long do we wait?" "Rousseau Publishing is fast. If they're excited about it, they could have it on shelves in 4 months. That would be just after your book comes out." "Perfect." So we wait. We wait. "And Lily?" "Yes." "Your family is going to hate you when this is over." I thought of dying at age 23, my throat closing, my sister's cold eyes watching. "They already do, Sarah. They just don't know I know it yet." The Golden Thread by Lily Beaumont was published on October 15th. It debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. The reviews were rapturous. A stunning debut that reimagines family drama through a fantastical lens. Beaumont's prose is both lyrical and razor sharp. New York Times Book Review. The Golden Thread is a masterwork of contemporary fantasy, a story about identity theft that becomes a meditation on selfhood and value. NPR. Beaumont writes with the wisdom of someone twice her age. This is a career-making debut. Washington Post. My publisher launched a major marketing campaign. I did dozens of interviews, went on a book tour, appeared on morning shows and podcasts. Everywhere I went, people asked about the symbolism of the braid, about the sister dynamic, about the themes of theft and identity. I smiled and answered carefully, never quite confirming that it was autobiographical, but never denying it either. Meanwhile, my family was silent. They didn't call, didn't congratulate me, didn't acknowledge my success in any way. But I knew they were watching, and I knew that in 6 weeks, Emma's version of The Golden Thread would hit shelves in France, published by Rousseau Publishing with significant fanfare. Henri's mother had positioned it as Emma's secret artistic side, proof that she was more than just a beautiful face. The French press was already excited about the supermodel-turned-novelist. I counted down the days. Emma's version of The Golden Thread was published in mid-December, timed to be a holiday bestseller. The launch party was held at a prestigious gallery in Paris, attended by celebrities, fashion designers, and literary luminaries. I was in New York, watching the Instagram posts roll in, Emma in a white gown holding court, Henri beaming beside her, my mother and father in the background, basking in reflected glory. The French reviews started appearing the next day. They were confused. A promising premise, but the execution feels unfinished. The prose lacks polish, and the ending feels rushed. Le Monde. Beaumont shows potential, but one wonders if she had a good editor. The book feels like a first draft. Libération. And then, from an astute reviewer at Les Inrocuptibles, there's something familiar about this story. It bears a striking resemblance to the novel by American author Lily Beaumont, published 2 months ago. Same title, same themes, similar plot, but this version feels like a shadow of that work. Perhaps Emma Beaumont was inspired by her sister? One hopes she gave credit. That was the crack in the dam. Within 24 hours, American book bloggers had picked up the story. Side-by-side comparisons started appearing online. Someone created a detailed breakdown of the similarities, not just in plot, but in specific sentences, descriptions, metaphors. The evidence was damning. Emma had stolen my work, but here's where it got interesting. The version Emma had published wasn't quite the same as the version on my laptop. She'd had someone, probably Henri or his mother's publishing team, edit it, polish it, try to make it better. But they'd kept the core scenes, the distinctive elements, the metaphors that were uniquely mine. They'd tried to hide the theft by improving it, but they'd left enough evidence that any forensic analysis would show the truth. On December 20th, Sarah sent a formal letter to Rousseau Publishing, along with a detailed timeline and extensive documentation. Proof that I'd sold my manuscript 8 months before Emma submitted hers. Proof that Emma had access to my laptop during Easter weekend testimony from my publisher about the editing process and timeline. Forensic. Analysis of the manuscript showing that Emma's version was derived from my early draft. She also included a demand, a public apology, full recall of Emma's book, and a substantial financial settlement. Rousseau Publishing's initial response was dismissive. They claimed Emma had been working on the novel for years, that any similarity was coincidental. So Sarah went public. She released the full letter and documentation to Publishers Weekly, The New York Times, and The Guardian. She gave interviews laying out the case clearly and methodically. She framed it not just as plagiarism, but as a pattern of theft, sister stealing from sister, model stealing from writer, privileged stealing from talented. The story exploded. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the Beaumont sisters. Think pieces appeared everywhere. Twitter was on fire. The hashtag #JusticeForLily was trending. Journalists started digging into our history. They found quotes from old interviews where Emma mentioned her supportive older sister who kept her grounded. They found photos of us together, my long braid and her copied braid, my face always slightly out of focus in the background. Someone found a blog post I'd written in high school about the meaning of hair in different cultures. Emma had used portions of that post nearly word for word in an interview about her signature look. The evidence of a lifetime of theft started mounting. And then Marcus went public. I hadn't asked him to, but he'd been there at Easter. He'd seen Emma try to flirt with him, and when he'd heard about the plagiarism, something had clicked into place. He gave an interview to a major publication describing Emma's behavior that weekend, how she'd pursued him despite being engaged, how I'd seemed wary and protective of my work, how I'd forgotten my laptop. Lily knew, he said in the interview. She knew her sister would steal from her because it had happened before. She set a trap, and Emma walked right into it. The narrative shifted. I wasn't just a victim, I was strategic, smart, someone who'd had enough and fought back. The public ate it up. On Christmas Eve, Rousseau Publishing announced they were halting distribution of Emma's book and launching an internal investigation. On December 27th, Henri Rousseau released a statement ending his engagement to Emma. The statement was diplomatic but clear. He couldn't be associated with someone accused of intellectual property theft, especially when his family's publishing business was involved. Emma's modeling contracts started falling away. First the smaller brands, then the major houses. Chanel, Dior, Valentino. All of them quietly dropped her. No one wanted to be associated with a plagiarist. My parents tried to circle the wagons. My mother gave an interview claiming I was jealous of Emma, that I'd always been jealous, that I'd fabricated this entire scandal to destroy my sister's career. But the evidence was overwhelming, and I had goy, something she didn't. Credibility. Years of published work, a track record, proof of my talent. Sarah went on Good Morning America and calmly, methodically dismantled every one of my mother's claims. She showed the timeline. She showed the manuscripts. She showed the forensic analysis. Lily Beaumont is a brilliant writer who's been systematically robbed by her own family for her entire life, Sarah said, looking directly into the camera. This isn't about jealousy, it's about justice. The court of public opinion had spoken. I was the victim. Emma was the villain. But I wasn't done yet. In early January, I got a call from an unexpected source, my grandmother, my father's mother, Patricia Beaumont, whom I hadn't seen since I was 10 years old. In my first life, she'd died when I was 16, and I'd barely known her. But I'd later learned that she'd been estranged from my father because she disapproved of how he and my mother treated me. Lily, she said, her voice warm and strong, I've been following your story. I think it's time we talked. We met at her apartment on the Upper East Side, a sprawling, elegant space filled with books and art. Patricia was in her 70s, sharp-eyed and gracious. I should have reached out sooner, she said over tea. I've regretted it for years, but I was angry at your father, and I let that anger keep me from you. That was wrong. Why were you angry at him? Because I watched him and your mother turn you into a resource for Emma. I watched them drain you dry to fuel her ambitions. I tried to intervene when you were young, but they cut me off. She smiled sadly. Richard has always been weak. He married a woman stronger than him and let her make all the decisions, including the decision to sacrifice one daughter for the other. Why are you telling me this now? Because you don't have to do this alone anymore, Lily. You fought brilliantly so far, but the battle isn't over. Your family will try to come after you financially, legally, any way they can. You need resources. You need protection. I have my book royalties, which are excellent, I'm sure. But I'm talking about generational wealth, real power. She leaned forward. Your grandfather, my late husband, built a fortune in publishing and real estate. When he died, he left everything to me. And I'm leaving it all to you. I stared at her. What? Richard was supposed to inherit, but I'm changing my will. He chose Emma over you. He chose wrong. So I'm choosing you. How much? I couldn't finish the question. $200 million, she said calmly. Plus the family estate in Connecticut, the apartment in Paris, and a controlling share in Beaumont Publishing. Yes, your father's company is named after our family, though he doesn't actually own it. I do. The room spun. That's a lot of power, Patricia finished. Power you can use to protect yourself, to build the life you deserve, and if you choose, to make sure your family can never hurt you again. I thought of my first life, of dying in that restaurant, of all the years of being invisible, being used, being drained. Yes, I said, I want that. Patricia smiled. Good, then let's begin. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers and strategic strikes. First, Patricia officially changed her will, making me her sole heir. The news leaked, accidentally on purpose, and appeared in the business section of the New York Times. My father called, furious, demanding to know what I'd done to turn my grandmother against him. I didn't answer. Second, using Patricia's controlling share, we called for an audit of Beaumont PR, my father's company. The audit revealed years of financial mismanagement and, worse, that my father had been using company funds to finance Emma's modeling career. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing expenses that had actually paid for Emma's headshots, portfolio development, and travel. The board, under Patricia's direction, demanded my father's resignation. He refused. So we fired him. Beaumont PR got a new CEO, a brilliant woman from a competitor firm, and a new direction. My father, stripped of his position and facing potential legal consequences for misuse of funds, had no choice but to retreat. Third, I filed a civil lawsuit against Emma for plagiarism, seeking damages not just for the stolen manuscript, but for years of intellectual property theft. I included documentation of every instance I could prove, the blog posts she'd repurposed, ideas she'd claimed as her own in interviews, even the signature braid that had become her trademark. The lawsuit wasn't about money. I didn't need it anymore. It was about the public record, about establishing, legally and formally, the pattern of theft. Emma's lawyers tried to settle. I refused. I wanted my day in court. The trial began in April, nearly a year after my book had been published. It was a civil case, not criminal, but the media treated it like the trial of the century. I sat in the courtroom wearing a simple gray suit, my hair now grown to just past my shoulders and styled in a sleek, modern cut. Nothing like the braid. Nothing like Emma. Emma sat across from me, her hair, the extensions, the braid, looking brittle and fake under the harsh courtroom lights. She'd lost weight. She looked tired, diminished. The fashion world had abandoned her, her engagement was over, and her parents were facing their own financial and legal troubles. She'd lost everything. And we both knew I'd orchestrated it. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Sarah testified about the manuscript theft. Marcus testified about Emma's behavior. My publisher brought in forensic experts who showed, line by line, how Emma's book was derived from my work. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. One of Emma's former friends, another model, who testified that Emma had bragged about stealing my work. She said her sister was nobody, the friend testified. She said it was better for the book to be published under Emma's name because she had the platform. She said her sister should be grateful for the exposure. The courtroom was silent. Emma's lawyer tried to do damage control, but the evidence was overwhelming. On April 28th, the jury found in my favor. Emma was ordered to pay me $3 million in damages, money she didn't have. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the statement I read to the court before sentencing, the statement that was recorded and transcribed and shared across every media platform. My sister didn't just steal my words, I said, looking directly at Emma. She stole my identity, my signature, my hair, my style, my accomplishments. She built her entire career on taking what was mine and claiming it as hers. And my family, our parents, enabled it. They taught her that I was a resource to be mined, not a person to be loved. They taught me that my only value was in what I could provide for her. But they were wrong, and this trial has proven it. I am not a resource. I am not a shadow. I am not an extension to make someone else look beautiful. I am Lily Beaumont. I am a writer. I am a person, and I am enough exactly as I am. The courtroom erupted in applause. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Emma filed for bankruptcy. The damages from the lawsuit, combined with her legal fees and loss of income, had destroyed her financially. She moved back in with our parents, who had lost their Manhattan apartment after my father's firing and were now renting a modest place in New Jersey. My mother tried to reach out to me once via email. The message was full of accusations and self-pity. How could I destroy my own family? Didn't I understand that we'd only been trying to help Emma succeed? Wasn't I being cruel and vindictive? I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my therapist. Yes, I was in therapy now, working through years of trauma, and let her help me process it. Patricia's health began to decline that summer. She was diagnosed with cancer, aggressive and terminal. But she faced it with grace, using her final months to ensure I was fully prepared to inherit her empire. "You're going to be very wealthy and very powerful," she told me during one of our last conversations. "Use it wisely, use it kindly, but don't ever let anyone make you small again." "I won't," I promised. She died in September peacefully with me holding her hand. I was now 22 years old and worth over $200 million. But money, I'd learned, wasn't the real prize. The real prize was freedom. I finished my second novel that fall. It was different from The Golden Thread, lighter, funnier, more hopeful. It was about a girl who escaped her toxic family and built a chosen family of friends and mentors who loved her for who she was. It was dedicated to Patricia, to Sarah, and to Marcus, who was still by my side, steady and true. The book sold even better than my first. I was no longer just a writer. I was a literary phenomenon. Publishers were fighting over my next contract. Movie studios wanted to adapt The Golden Thread. My face was on magazine covers, but on my terms, telling my story in my words. And my hair? I kept it short. Not as short as it had been at 14, but shoulder length, manageable mine. I donated my cut hair to a charity that made wigs for children with cancer. A final, definitive statement that my hair was not about beauty or identity or signature looks. It was about choice. One day, about a year after Patricia's death, I got a call from a social worker. Emma had had a breakdown and been hospitalized. She was asking for me. I thought about it for a long time. Thought about the poison in my throat in that past life. Thought about every casual cruelty, every theft, every moment she'd chosen to hurt me. And then I thought about who I was now, about the person I'd fought so hard to become. I went to visit her. She was in a psychiatric facility, a nice one that my father's new insurance barely covered. She looked small in the hospital bed, her hair, her real hair, without the extensions, thin and mousy and ordinary. "Lily," she said when she saw me. Her voice was hoarse. "You came." "I did." "I'm sorry." The words came out in a rush. "I'm so sorry for everything. For stealing your work, for copying you, for everything. I was jealous. You were always the smart one, the talented one, and I was just pretty. And I was terrified that pretty wouldn't be enough. So I took what was yours." I sat down in the chair beside her bed. "You were never just pretty, Emma. You were charismatic, ambitious, driven. You could have built your own identity. You didn't need mine. But it was easier to take yours," she said bitterly. "Mom made it so easy. She told me I deserved it, that you were there to support me, that it was natural for you to help me because I was the special one. Mom was wrong. I know that now." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I destroyed my own life, Lily. And I destroyed any chance of us being real sisters. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I needed you to know I finally understand what I did." I looked at her for a long moment. In my first life, I'd died loving her, still hoping for her approval. In this life, I'd spent years hating her, planning her downfall. But sitting there, looking at her broken and small, I felt nothing. No love, no hate. Just a kind of detached pity. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. "But I don't hate you either. You're just someone I used to know. Someone who hurt me. Someone I've moved past." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "That's fair." I stood up. "Get better, Emma. Figure out who you are without my identity propping you up, but do it far away from me." "I will," she whispered. I left without looking back. That was 3 years ago. Now I'm 25. My fourth novel just hit shelves. I own a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, right at a cozy desk overlooking the garden, and share my life with Marcus, who proposed last Christmas. I'm on the board of 3 charities that support young women in the arts. I've established a scholarship fund at Columbia for first-generation college students pursuing creative writing. I've used Patricia's money to build something good and real and lasting. My father and I have a cordial but distant relationship. We exchange birthday cards. That's enough. My mother and I don't speak at all. She's never forgiven me for what she sees as my betrayal. I'm okay with that. Emma, last I heard, moved to California. She's working as an assistant at a small gallery, living a quiet life under a different name. I hope she's found peace. As for me, I cut my hair short again last month. Pixie cut short. Not because of Emma, not as a statement, but because I wanted to. Because it felt right. Because my hair is mine and I can do whatever I want with it. I stood in the salon chair and watched the stylist work, saw the golden strands falling like snow around me. And when she was done, I looked at my reflection and smiled. I looked nothing like Emma. I looked exactly like myself. And that was the greatest victory of all. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that first life. About dying in that restaurant, my sister's cold eyes watching me choke. About all the years I spent making myself smaller, dimmer, less, so she could shine. About the poison in more ways than one. And I think about this life. About the moment I woke up at 14 and decided to rewrite my story. About every choice I made to choose myself, to fight back, to refuse to disappear. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about what my family did, if I'm still bitter. The truth is, I'm not. I'm grateful. Because they taught me the most important lesson, that love isn't about sacrifice. Real love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. Real love doesn't steal your identity and wear it like a costume. Real love sees you, celebrates you, wants you to shine as bright as you can. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, then you find new people. You build a new family. You create your own light. You stop being the raw material for someone else's success story, and you write your own goddamn story instead. That's what I did. And I'm still writing it every single day, one word at a time. The story of Lily Beaumont, who died and was reborn, who cut off her golden braid and donated it to children who needed it more than her sister ever did, who refused to be a shadow, who claimed her voice and used it to tell the truth. My truth, the only truth that matters. I am not my hair. I am not my sister's mirror. I am not a resource to be mined. I am a writer. I am a person. I am enough, and I am finally completely joyfully free.